Good morning still. Great to have you here today, and good to be in Lowville, as it always is, talking about an issue that in the summertime we think about cooling a lot more than we think about heating, but this is an issue that is rapidly coming the way of the homeowners of the North Country, and that is electrification of every building across New York State on what we view as a very unreasonable timeline. So I've got some guests with me here today who can bring a little bit of red meat and a little bit of personality to this press conference. I just wanted to kick it off by saying I voted against the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA, New York's Green New Deal, and I did so for very good reason. The North Country is a difficult place to heat. We are very dependent on propane and natural gas and outdoor wood boilers. And it is critically important for the life and the safety of the New Yorkers that live across the North Country that they have heat to their homes that is consistent in all weather. Do we want to green the economy over time? Absolutely. Do we care about the environment? There's no question. Everybody who's going to speak today absolutely does. But we also have to be reasonable about the technology that exists and practical about implementing some changes in the state of New York. So I would just like to introduce a well-known, someone that doesn't need any introduction whatsoever, but a man that I've learned to really appreciate his leadership here in Lewis County, and that's Chairman of the Legislature, Larry Doyle.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, everyone. I understand the idealistic goals that we're trying to do with electrification, but I agree with the Senator's comment that the timeline is too short. No one has really addressed the reality of trying to get this done in such a short amount of time, and it's just not feasible that we can get there. The electrification to me was the legislature grabbing at straws, trying to come up with a solution to a problem that really has not been thoroughly identified as to what is really causing global warming. The electrification was the easiest straw to grab on. I believe that's where we're at, and no one has really thought out the impact or the reality of trying to get there in such a short time. I was coming back from, I think it was Albany at one point. My wife is driving, we're on the thruway. So I thought, okay, we're going to electrify, we're going all EV vehicles. How many electric charging stations are we going to have on the thruway? So I Googled it. The Thruway Authority came back with a response that we're going to have at least 2 charging stations at every thruway stop. 2 charging stations to me is a drop in the bucket. That's what's going to be needed. When you think about filling a car with gas that takes 5 minutes, and now you have to plug your car in for a half an hour to 45 minutes to get a charge, particularly in the wintertime when a battery, its ability at say at 20 below zero like it is up here, is 30% of what it's plated for. So, you know, there's a lot of things that have not been thought through. Recently, they came up with a mandate that all school buses in the future will be electric. Okay, great idea, great concept. But has anybody really thought about, you know, the fact that in the wintertime up here is 20 below zero, the battery on the bus is not capable of producing enough electricity to do the route. Things like that haven't been thought out, and I think like I said, I understand the goal to reduce CO2 emissions, but I think we need to slow down a little bit and maybe come up with and support things in the interim, such as natural gas or propane, that will get us to that goal in a more reasonable amount of time. Propane natural gas emits half of the CO2, the emissions that coal does. I think if you put a scrubber on a stack, you probably can reduce it to almost nil. But none of that has really been investigated. We've just grabbed this straw for electrification, and that's where we're at. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Larry. And you might be wondering why we're standing in front of this North Country home here in Lowville. And Chrissy, would you like to say a few words? You'll have to forgive her, gentlemen. She's not used to being in front of the camera. Didn't want to be out front. But the story that I think is most important here is to tell that this has a very real impact. We've heard all kinds of price estimates on homes, and I would just like, Chrissy, if you wouldn't mind saying a couple words about
Sure.
here and your dependence on natural gas. Come on up. I'll stand with you.
Yes, I'm definitely a person. We love our natural gas here. It's extremely affordable. It's not dependent on the winter conditions that we have here. When we have electricity that goes out, I'm still able to cook. I mean, it's a reliable source. I can light it with a match and turn on my stove and still have my cooking. It's an even heat. It's instant heat. And so I thank you very much for trying to be an advocate to keep people being able to have gases, and we're not everybody wants electricity. It's affordable for us, so thank you.
Thank you. Nice job. See, that was easy.
No, it was not.
All right, and from an industry that is directly impacted, and we're talking about good paying North Country jobs and a business that's been built over years that people depend on for their livelihood, not only to heat their homes, but to put food on the table. Superior Plus Regional Operations Manager Kevin Brady would like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Senator. All right, good morning. Again, my name is Kevin Brady. I'm a Regional Operations Manager for Superior Plus Propane. I want to first start off by saying that we as an industry agree that climate change is a real serious threat to our planet, and we support the state's efforts in trying to make a difference. Some people in the state are in favor of an aggressive climate change action, but there are a lot of ideas on what the best course of action is. We believe that mass electrification is a bad idea, and we feel the answer is in multiple clean fuels that are getting increasingly renewable every single day, like propane and bioheating oil. We believe there are a few main issues with the current solution that New York has set forth, the first one being affordability to the consumer. This will cost rural homeowners tens of thousands of dollars to comply to this mandate. The second, reliability. Currently, energy usage is spread out through the consumer through various means, whether it's heating oil, natural gas, propane, electric. This bill will put much added stress on an already aging electrical grid that can lead to blackouts and brownouts during the dead of winter when we are forced to rely exclusively on that aging grid. This can lead to some catastrophic events. We all saw what happened this past year in Western New York, where 200,000 people were without power for multiple days on end during Christmas last year. The third is a consumer's right to choice, specifically around the outlaw of gas stoves and the need to heat your home with electric. When it comes to gas stoves, people all over the country prefer to cook with gas, as you can cook your food more evenly and you can control the temperature a little bit better. The current law will ban the use of gas stoves in new construction and will outlaw replacement of fossil fuel stoves over the next decade. This will force people to change to electric. I've seen a lot of recent studies about harmful emissions when it comes to gas stoves, and I don't think people are hearing the entire story. The same study has also found harmful emissions coming from electric stoves, and that tends to be left out of the story. If the discussion is around air pollutants, we really should be talking about a properly working ventilation system, and this will eliminate the issue regardless if you're using gas or if you're using electric. At the end of the day, the radical change in New York will not make a major difference to climate change, since New York accounts for less than 1/2% of the planet's total carbon emissions. Anything we take offline is being replaced in China and India by coal-fired power plants as we speak. What people tend to forget about is how the electrical grid is powered. In many cases, it's still powered by fossil fuels today, and it defeats what we are trying to accomplish. Again, we support the state's efforts in trying to make a difference to climate change, but mass electrification, though, is not the answer. Thank you for your time, letting me share my views of the CLCPA and how it will affect the New York homeowner if we don't continue to talk about the issues.
We'll take questions in a minute. I just want to I want to close with a couple of things. So we had a hearing early on. It was one of the first things that I attended as a New York State Senator. It was a hearing about the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA, New York's Green New Deal, if you will. And that hearing was about legislation and implementation. We were hearing from the draft scoping plan, which was really their plan, which has now become their plan to electrify New York State. And at that hearing, I asked a pretty simple question of an agency head who was in charge of all the state buildings in New York. And I said, well, what is the plan for the governor to electrify the governor's mansion? And they said, well, we'll have to get back to you on a timeline and a price for that. And I said, fair enough. So I had my staff follow up, and we finally got a hold of OGS and got an answer from them on the phone. The answer was, at some point this year, we're working on it. We have to study this building over a long period of time, and we have to use 3 different state agencies in order to study this one home in the state of New York. And so finally we followed up in writing, and we finally got a solid answer. What, at least from this administration, seems like a solid answer on when the governor will have a plan for electrifying. So after more than 1 year from the time that she announced all state buildings will be on a board. We'll pause for the Jake break. So one year after the governor announced that all state buildings will be on an even more aggressive timeline for electrification, 1 year later, she'll finally say that after the use of 3 state agencies, there will be a plan to electrify the governor's mansion, which is incredible, because that same plan right now is requiring homes like this to be electrified by 2026. If it takes the governor a year to electrify her house, just to come up with a plan to electrify her house, what are the options for the regular homeowner in New York State? Look, I am proud to represent the 49th Senate District. This timeline is completely unreasonable for the people that I represent, but we do have some solutions. I don't just come to you and say that there's a problem with the way that New York State is going forward. There absolutely is. It's completely unreasonable and way too costly. Some of the low-end estimates say this is going to cost New Yorkers $300 billion. That's right, billion with a B, and I did say low-end estimates. Those are estimates that are 2 years old by the governor's own agencies. What the state needs to do is recognize the importance of businesses like this as they bridge to whatever future they have in energy. Recognize climates like the one that we live in here in northern New York, and the importance of these fuels in heating our homes. They need to be ready to invest in nuclear and clean hydrogen and continue to invest in wind and solar and other things that are going to help them transition. And they need to stop subsidizing technology that has already proven that it's got a place in the marketplace and a strong foothold. Until those things are done, we really shouldn't even be talking about converting a home like this and sticking a bill of $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 on a single homeowner, sometimes to the cost, to more than the value of the northern New York home, and sometimes the capability of the grid not even capable of supporting it. Chrissy, do you know what the amperage service to this home is?
I don't. You have to have my
So we'd have to ask the in-house electrician, but most
somewhere around 200.
Most homes like this, which is a beautiful and looks like newly updated home, have 200 amp service or less. There's no real reason as a homeowner in New York State to have more than 200 amp service, unless the government tells you that you have to drive an electric car and you have to fully heat your home with electricity. Now, what does that mean for the average homeowner? That means an upgrade in the service to your home, maybe from 200 to 400 amp. And if you talk to National Grid or whoever supplies the power to your home, they're going to put a price tag, not just on the rate that you'll be paying, but how much it costs to get that wire. And there's many homes across all of upstate New York that isn't even a feasible proposition. If you call your electrical company, they'll say, we don't even have the phase power running in your area to support that much power draw. So all of this to say, way too much, way too fast, way too expensive, and even by the governor's own admission in saying it takes her 3 agencies and over a full year of study just to come up with a plan to electrify her one mansion in Albany is ridiculous that we would expect it of homeowners in northern New York. With that, we'll take any questions.
For those that might be watching and aren't 100% familiar with the issue that you're talking about, can you give us a little bit of a timeline as far as like where things stand currently? So discussing like new builds as opposed to what's already in place?
So new builds with some very few exceptions will have to be fully electric in the near term, I believe starting next year at the turn of the calendar for 2025.
Okay, and with existing homes?
With existing homes, the expectation is that you are going to fully electrify that existing home by 2026, just 2.5 years from now.
Okay. Now, the county has been through many building projects over the last year and a half, and electrical components have been, securing those parts have been kind of an issue for many of the projects. Has anybody addressed like the availability of the electrical components needed for these upgrades?
You make a great observation. There's a lot of issues logistically. One thing that stands out is that, after this certain date of electrification, the governor said this, we're not coming for your gas stove, we're not even coming for your gas furnace, but you'll only have to replace it with an electrification system. You can't put a new gas furnace in. Well, what happens in February when your gas furnace goes out or needs a major repair, needs a replacement? I mean, it's ridiculous to think that someone is going to install geothermal or somehow get heat pumps up when it's negative 20 degrees outside, when their house clearly needs a new furnace so that people can live in it. A lot of these things just haven't been thought through at all. But the point is, they don't have, the grid is not in a position, and the power production in this state is not in a position to even handle the amount of electrical draw that each home would require. So the governor is way out in front of her skis. Albany politicians are way out in front of their skis on this one, and they need to back off.
So, just, not to oversimplify it in any particular way, but you have one side that is trying to push legislation, push agendas through to, as they say, green energy, climate change. You have another side that says that they have their own set of solutions, their own set of ways to address this problem and address the ever-growing belief in climate change. How do you guys meet in the middle to get actual legislation passed?
Yeah, that's the key, is coming up with something that is feasible, and I would say that's meet in the middle. Look, nobody wants a dirtier climate. Everyone wants cleaner air to breathe. Everyone wants to move in a way that is greener and more sustainable. But there's a timeline that's reasonable. And in some places, it's not even feasible right now to eliminate natural gas at all. We are tremendously dependent on fuels, on biofuels, on propane, and on natural gas. As Superior Plus pointed out, it is critically important to heating the homes of northern New York, and there isn't even a good technological solution to that problem yet. Now, pair that with all of the issues that I stated on the power production side for electricity, the power transmission side for electricity, and then the cost of upgrading every governmental building, every private building, and every homeowner in the state of New York to receive that electrical system. This is going to take a long period of time and needs to be done in a way that's actually feasible for the people of the state of New York.
And then just how did you happen to come together? How was this all here at this particular location? What was the inspiration for choosing this home and this lovely homeowner?
Yeah, and well, as you can see, Chrissy doesn't love to jump in front of a camera. She wanted to speak out today because this is a regular homeowner in the state of New York that doesn't know how much it's going to cost to upgrade this building. Certainly doesn't know how her home is going to get heated without the natural gas service that she's been heating and cooking with for a long time. So when the governor says you're going to have to get rid of your gas stove, you're going to have to get rid of your gas furnace, there isn't a solution for the home that Chrissy lives in and the home that's behind me. And that's why we're here.
With the legislation passed, what steps can people take to voice their concerns if they have concerns with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Call the governor's office. And, you could even empower yourself with a little bit of information. Call a contractor and ask them how much it would cost to upgrade your home. Go and look at your electric panel, see what the amp service is to the place, and then ask your national grid or your electric service provider, how much would it cost to go from 100 amp? We have a lot of homes in northern New York that are still on 100 amp service and tremendously dependent. If you have a natural gas dryer and a lot of natural gas appliances, there's a chance that you don't have very much electricity coming into your building. And it might be very expensive or not feasible at all. So reach out to your service provider and say, hey, how much would it cost me, or is it even feasible for me to get an upgrade in electrical service to this building? And once you pair those very simple cost estimates, we haven't even talked about the envelope, upgrading a building, greater insulation, all of those things. You just take those very simple cost estimates, and I promise every northern New Yorker is going to have a real problem with this plan. Good? All right, thanks, gentlemen.